The cabmen, too, who twice a week, on the night when the A.S.N. Company's passenger boat was due to arrive, used to range a battalion of blazing lamps opposite the ship, were very amusing in their way. They got down from their perches and told each other impolite stories in racy language, every word of which reached me distinctly over the bulwarks as I sat smoking on the main hatch. On one occasion I had an hour or so of a most intellectual conversation with a person whom I could not see distinctly, a gentleman from England, he said, with a cultivated voice. I on deck and he on the quay sitting on the case of a piano, landed out of our hold that very afternoon, and smoking a cigar which smelt very good. We touched, in our discourse, upon science, politics, natural history, and operatic singers. Then, after remarking abruptly, "You seem to be rather intelligent, my man," he informed me pointedly that his name was Mr. Senior, and walked off to his hotel, I suppose. Shadows, shadows. I think I saw a white whisker as he turned under the lamp-post. It is a shock to think that in the natural course of nature he must be dead by now. There was nothing to object to in his intelligence but a little dogmatism, perhaps, and his name was Senior, Mr. Senior. The position had its drawbacks, however. One wintry, blustering, dark night in July, as I stood sleepily out of the rain under the break of the poop, something resembling an ostrich dashed up the gangway. I say ostrich because the creature, though it ran on two legs, appeared to help its progress by working a pair of short wings. It was a man, however, only his coat, ripped up the back and flapping in two halves above his shoulders, gave him that weird and fowl-like appearance. At least, I suppose it was his coat, for it was impossible to make him out distinctly. How he managed to come so straight upon me at speed and without a stumble over a strange deck I cannot imagine. He must have been able to see in the dark better than a cat. He overwhelmed me with panting entreaties to let him take shelter till morning in our forecastle. Following my strict orders, I refused his request, mildly at first, in a sterner tone as he insisted with growing impudence. "For God's sake, let me, matey. Some of 'em are after me, and I've got hold of a ticker here." "You clear out of this," I said. "Don't be hard on a chap, old man," he whined pitifully. "Now then, get ashore at once, do you hear?" Silence. He appeared to cringe, mute, as if words had failed him through grief. Then, bang, came a concussion and a great flash of light in which he vanished, leaving me prone on my back with the most abominable black eye that anybody ever got in the faithful discharge of duty. Shadows, shadows. I hope he escaped the enemies he was fleeing from to live and flourish to this day. But his fist was uncommonly hard and his aim miraculously true in the dark. There were other experiences, less painful and more funny for the most part, with one amongst them of a dramatic complexion. But the greatest experience of them all was Mr. B., our chief mate himself. He used to go ashore every night to foregather in some hotel's parlour with his crony, the mate of the barque Cicero, lying on the other side of the circular quay. Late at night I would hear from afar their stumbling footsteps and their voices raised in endless argument. The mate of the Cicero was seeing his friend on board. They would continue their senseless and muddy discourse in tones of profound friendship for half an hour or so at the shore end of our gangway, and then I would hear Mr. B insisting that he must see the other on board his ship. And away they would go, their voices, still conversing with excessive amity, being heard moving all around the harbour. It happened more than once that they would thus perambulate 3 or 4 times the distance, each seeing the other on board his ship out of pure and disinterested affection. Then, through sheer weariness, or perhaps in a moment of forgetfulness, they would manage to part from each other somehow, and by the planks of our long gangway would bend and creak under the weight of Mr. B coming on board for good at last. On the rail his burly form would stop and stand swaying. "Watchman!" "Sir!" A pause. He waited for a moment of steadiness before negotiating the 3 steps of the inside ladder from rail to deck, and the watchman, taught by experience, would forbear offering help which would be received as an insult at that particular stage of the mate's return. But many times I trembled for his neck. He was a heavy man. Then, with a rush and a thump, it would be done. He never had to pick himself up, but it took him a minute or so to pull himself together after the descent. "Watchman!" "Sir!" "Captain aboard?" "Yes, sir." Pause. "Dog aboard?" "Yes, sir." Pause. Our dog was a gaunt and unpleasant beast, more like a wolf in poor health than a dog, and I never noticed Mr. B at any other time show the slightest interest in the doings of the animal, but that question never failed him. "Let's have your arm to steady me along." I was always prepared for that request. He leaned on me heavily till near enough the cabin door to catch hold of the handle. Then he would let go my arm at once. "That'll do. I can manage now." And he could manage. He could manage to find his way into his berth, light his lamp, get into his bed, and get out of it when I called him at 5:30, the first man on deck, lifting the cup of morning coffee to his lips with a steady hand, ready for duty as though he had virtuously slept 10 solid hours. A better chief officer than many a man who had never tasted grog in his life. He could manage all that, but could never manage to get on in life. Only once he failed to seize the cabin door handle at the first grab. He waited a little, tried again, and again failed. His weight was growing heavier on my arm. He sighed slowly. "Damn that handle!" Without letting go his hold of me, he turned about, his face lit up bright as day by the full moon. "I wish she were out at sea," he growled savagely. "Yes, sir." I felt the need to say something, because he hung on me as if lost, breathing heavily. "Ports are no good. Ships rot. Men go to the devil." I kept still, and after a while he repeated with a sigh, "I wish she were at sea out of this." "So do I, sir," I ventured. Holding my shoulder, he turned upon me. "You! What's that to you where she is? You don't drink." And even on that night he managed it at last. He got hold of the handle, but he did not manage to light his lamp. I don't think he even tried, though in the morning, as usual, he was the first on deck, bull-necked, curly-headed, watching the hands turn to with his sardonic expression and unflinching gaze. I met him 10 years afterwards, casually, unexpectedly, in the street, on coming out of my consignee office. I was not likely to have